I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to I Mix What I Like. I'm Jared Ball, joined by Sudip Bhattacharya. Good morning as we continue our publicly held Donut King project meetings. And we'll continue our discussion of Grace and James Boggs' Revolution and Evolution book a little bit today, and maybe some other things. But so as you all come on in, please like, share, subscribe, support the platform however you feel comfortable. Please, if you haven't already, go ahead and sign up for the screening of Crushing Wheelchairs tonight in DC. And I'll talk a little bit about last night's event in a minute. But Sudip, good morning. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Hey, Jared. Sorry. Yeah, just excited. And also, I think the next thing we're tackling, right, because is Zionist literature by Ghassan Kanafani. That's next Monday, I think.
Right. 10. Yep, exactly. So folks, if you are not already, planning for it, we are going to revisit Ghassan Kanafani's work, and that will be May 18th, right back here at 10 a.m. So please, just plan accordingly. Looking forward to that. If I can, just quickly, I just want to shout out Baltimore and the Poor Magazine crew, Poverty Scholars, who had the screening of Crushing Wheelchairs in Baltimore. Salute to Evan from BAP and Davon and Lawrence from Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, and Dr. Asar Winkler, who we saw there as well. A number of other great folks came out and had a powerful screening of the film. We'll be in DC tonight, so please, if you can, just check that QR code over there and check it out. If he shows up, I actually thought I should have invited him to show up in the chat. But if I see him today, we can ask Dr. Winkler to share some of his thoughts. He shared some thoughts after the screening last night, and just confirming how powerful the film is. So definitely want to salute them. But so yeah, Sudip, in part because I was out way past my bedtime last night. I am a little tired, and I somehow gotta do this all over again today. I don't know how people continue to do this, but so I'm going to lean on you a little more heavily today than normal, perhaps.
Okay.
And follow your lead as much as possible. And the essay you sent separately, I only read very quickly, so I don't.
I got it.
I don't want to pretend that I can add something powerful to what you have there, but and just so folks are clear, I will show. I don't know if you want to talk about it first or whatever, but just so people know that referring to this article here, "These Are the Times That Grow Our Souls" by Grace Lee Boggs. Where was this? American for the Arts. And when was this written? I didn't.
It said it said the speech was given in October 2003.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was right after the Iraq invasion, because she briefly mentions it.
That's right. Exactly. Okay. And again, just so folks are reminded, the point here is to add some depth to the problematic narratives around Black and Asian economics and constant attempts to make silly comparisons between the two that don't really get us anywhere.
Right.
So again, I'm very happy that you had us read these pieces, and would definitely encourage people to, if they aren't already familiar, to get this book and review it, just in terms of some of the histories that Boggs covers, that the Boggses themselves cover, I should say.
And I just started reading this one, The American Revolution by James Boggs. I didn't get really into it that much, but I just started reading that.
Yeah, I want to keep the dollar secrets to myself. Yipper.
Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to say really quick about this one. These are the times I grow our soul. I do teach this with my students in my race and ethnicity class, and at least part one in the Asian American class that I also teach. And I just shared it with you yesterday afternoon, just because it wasn't so much of like just another thing to read. It was more like a compare and contrast, even between the Grace Lee in Revolution and Evolution and the Grace Lee that is a bit different later, because even in the introduction by her, but in Revolution Evolution, because of the reprint, it is a bit different than the rest of the book, in my opinion. In some aspects of it, like for one, she doesn't really mention as much about capitalism like she does, but it's changed into some form of like globalization or economic centralization, which is fine. But also there is a way more emphasis, in my opinion, even from watching the movie about her life, because she did a not a small documentary, but a documentary about her life when she was still around with this other Asian American filmmaker, I think for PBS. I think it was called American Radical. And I watched it. It was very interesting because in that movie, you can sort of tell the two parts of her life, they're sort of butting heads slightly. There's a part of her life with James, and then later after that too, where she was very, very upfront about this sort of history that's in the majority of this book. The Bolsheviks, the Guinea-Bissau, the everything. And then there's a part of her life in the 2000s when she's sort of rediscovered by Asian American activists too, who are just enamored about this Chinese American woman who existed in this majority Black space in a majority Black city, being trusted by so many Black radicals as this godmother of sorts. They were sort of enamored by that. But what's interesting in that timeline, which is reflected in this 2003 speech / article, she's also a little bit different in some of her positionality in terms of how she's situating the politics. Because like in this thing, it's funny because there are themes in this article that are in Revolution Evolution. The theme of internal, external struggle, the theme of culture, but definitely into 2003 version of her, at least, and in some aspects of the movie, if I remember correctly, there was more of an emphasis on culture, and there was more of an emphasis on the artist and on, to be honest, community control, like extremely local variants of control. So that was just something I just found very fascinating, because when you read Revolution Evolution, that's kind of there, but they're still positioned. I mean, they start off the book with 4 different revolutions, all of which were either Marxist-Leninist, or Marxist-Leninist inspired, right? And then you have this sort of shift in the latter part of her life, where it was like she mentions it, but she still sort of uses it in more discreet ways. Because in this article, she still mentions cultural revolution, and she still mentions leadership, but it's not in this. I don't think it's in the same kind of way that she mentions it with her husband in Revolution Evolution. So that's why I find the piece so interesting to me.
That is interesting, and I didn't pick up on those differences. I am just looking back at the introduction to Revolution and Evolution, and she does say on page 8 that that they had warned that we had entered into a new stage of multinational capitalism,
right?
And then says something about but then she seems to yeah, I was, as I said last time, I appreciate what she's doing here, and I think there's a lot to learn from. I don't know that I fully agree with everything that she's saying, because I've always struggled with people attempting to draw what I think are unnecessary distinctions between the form of capitalism that we're experiencing, as if as if her claim that we've moved into multinational capitalism, or people using crony capitalism, or as if capitalism just by itself isn't bad enough, or as if it also sometimes reads as if people are saying capitalism itself is not a problem, it's the abuses of it that become a problem. Because then she says she says on the next page, also, despite our efforts to decentralize and demystify leadership, we had not deconstructed Marxist Leninist concepts of democratic centralism in the vanguard party. Organizations in the Black community especially need to accept this challenge, because it is too easy for them to adopt a top-down and male leadership patterns of the Black church. So that's why I'm saying, you know, maybe I just need to have a more careful reread or continued discussion of what she's saying here, because to your point, then the next several chapters are all about these Marxist-based revolutions, including then a whole chapter after that on dialectics, only to come back at the end with something she says almost in criticism at the beginning, in the introduction, talking about people needing to move beyond victim and minority thinking. And so at the end, she comes back to be critical of third world, colonial, and Pan-Africanist thinking, which to me is a response to what she says here at the beginning of minority thinking, that was part of the expressed conscious argument of those world majority internationalist arts, to say we are not just a minority here in the United States. We are part of a diaspora. We are part of a larger anti-colonial, anti-imperial movement and struggle that involve, and that's why Pan-Africanism, you know, third worldism, or whatever she was, you know, I've always thought were so important, and why I myself, you know, wanted to adopt the internal colonial theory for Black people here, because I said specifically in my own dissertation at the time, I'm doing this decidedly because I want to put Black people back on the world stage appropriately, to paraphrase John Henrik Clarke, and to say that we're not just some minority disconnected from every other community and movement. We are part of, so I was, so even just re-looking at this now and in preparation for today, I was just like, I do struggle with that. And then and then it's all this really, I think, important exploration into these Marxist revolutions.
Well, you know? The thing about the book is, so, well, I'm also referring to the introduction, because there is the because when she does the reframing of everything, because this intro that she writes, I'm guessing is when Pub Monthly Press decided to 2008, she wrote this new introduction to the thing, and you know, I don't think I read it the first time I read this book. I just skipped over it. But having read some other things by her, I decided to read it for this time, just to see. Well, actually, no, I lie. It looks like I have some underlines from the last version of me who did this. But in that introduction, it is very, very similar-ish to 2003 article that I shared in some degree. So, for instance, again, some of her diagnoses still, I mean, for both of them, I just want to keep James and Grace Lee, for both of them, they still are making some very salient points about how there needs to be a revolution inside the US because the US controls so much. They're very blunt about saying the United States basically is a blight on the world. They basically say that. And they also eerily point out, very similar to now with Gaza, and of course just Palestine overall, how there is a genocide in Indochina, Vietnam, which they call out. So they don't mince words. And also there's a part that I found so interesting where they just basically did this really, and I bring this up because I think when they say things like this, I again begin to really understand just how how important they are in terms of how they're framing the world. So there's a point in the latter half of the book where they say something about I'm finding it really quickly. Oh, here it is. They basically talk about in page um 262 at the bottom, where they basically say um, they're going in again about how the United States empire is the empire that needs to fall, and how it has to be completely gutted, and a lot of Americans have to accept this, which is true too. Like there's a lot of truths, sort of like folded in, almost like almost some sort of, cake or something, folded into all these other things that kind of make you go, huh? Like, but so this is one line that I really admire, because this is something that a lot of socialists, not a lot, but a lot of maybe SOCDEM types in the American political discourse refuse to get until it's too late, which has happened with Palestine, right? So she says at the bottom, they say at the bottom, now these much less than human acts, they're talking about empire abroad, US empire, which so many less than human Americans were ready to accept in the name of US interests, have come home in the form of wiretapping, taping, spying, and other kinds of covert activities, whose scope is still unknown by some Americans against others. So one thing that is maybe missed by them is that, of course, these things were happening domestically for a long time. There's a really great book by Seema Sohi about the Ghadar Party, which was this anti-colonial grouping of South Asians who had fled British Raj in the late 1800s because there had been a failed rebellion. So the British were finally letting them go. Like the British actually wanted no Indians to leave for a long time because they wanted their labor. But after a couple of uprisings, they were basically saying, we'll open our Commonwealth borders so some of the intellectuals can leave, so we can get back to business. So some of them did leave, but they ended up in America because they also fell into the trap that America was this sort of, they fell into the myth of America. So they first arrived in Canada. They got thrown of Canada because people forget Canada is part of the Commonwealth and they are pretty pro British. So they helped the British explicitly to kick them out. And then they arrived in Cali, and then they began to organize against the British still. And then the British began to work with the Americans to create what's considered to be one of the first examples of intelligence gathering domestically. But they are correct to say all these imperial schemes come back to haunt us. And I bring this up because this is something that I think a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but I think in some of the discourse I'm in, there still is this weird insistence on separating out domestic from foreign. And you can also see this sometimes in some of the domestic politics that kind of skew progressive until it's too late. Like Zoran Mamdani, for example, had done a good job earlier when he was running to talk about Israel to a degree and talk about how I'm not going to, go to Tel Aviv. But sometimes now with him in power, and he's done some good things, but with him in power, there's still a gap in how he's presenting these issues. Like I would really like for him and other people, and I don't think it's going to happen, but I'd like for him and other people to really say, hey, we're all, to your point about Pan-Africanism, as third world people, as colonized people, as working class colonized people, we are part of the same front, regardless of what side of the so-called border we live on. And it's very clear with Palestine, right? Like since that new portal has opened up with the genocide that's happening, what's been happening here? People have been Palestinian Americans can't even say what they really want to say without being detained or thrown away or deported. So all I'm saying is that this book was correct on that front. But then it goes into the parts where, like I sometimes tilt my head and I'm just like, okay, like I actually don't know how they concluded certain aspects of what they go on, because they go hard in many ways about the American empire, and then they say things like you said, well, Pan-Africanism is a bit narrow, but it's Pan-Africanism by definition, it's not narrow. So that's why, yeah, I felt the same also with the
And
third
there are also
worldism.
different forms of it that they don't
Right.
acknowledge,
Yeah,
different
exactly.
applications. I thought it's interesting on that page you were just reading from that she says, or they say, in on 262, in the witness chair of the Senate caucus room, day after day, we see men who are no different from the
Yeah.
Goebbels and the Eichmanns in their loyalty to the leader. And I thought of Ward Churchill's post 9/11 speech about roosting chickens that got him in so much trouble, where he said that the people in the towers, and he said, I'm not talking about the cooks and the janitorial
Right.
services, but the people working in those intelligence agencies and weapons manufacturers and banking institutions and intelligence institution, those people, he called them little Eichmanns. And he said, and he broke down who Eichmann was, and he said Eichmann didn't pull any triggers. He didn't switch gases on. He didn't shoot anybody. All he did was organize the machinery of the Holocaust. And that's what Churchill, I thought, accurately equated people in those Twin Towers to say, whatever you think of 9/11, you have to acknowledge that these were military targeted strikes and not targeting innocents. So to see, and I'm not entirely sure when this was this conclusion written after 9/11.
No. I think this is with the book.
This is still 74 in the original publication.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were already on that same kind of logic that as I interpret what they're saying here, the Congress or the Senate in their specific reference were behaving to allow the machinery of genocide to go on.
Well, I mean, they say like the use of the big lie and the Godfather and all these different terms, like they were very accurate and very revelatory in understanding how, in the end, there is a consortium of interests that are burning the world down, even in their so-called, good interests for themselves. And so this is why they're so demanding on the American people, which I kind of get that way. When you connect it to that we are part of the Nazi Germany on acid, we really are an unstoppable force at times, right? I mean, we look at the example with, I was just watching Al Jazeera, which also does its own propaganda efforts against Iran. But, reading between the lines, what Iran is demanding is just their borders be respected at the very least, and that this crazy other proxy country, Israel, doesn't keep assassinating its people and helping in the killing of school children, masses of them. And then on our side is this guy named Trump, similar to Bill Clinton, again, the two-party duopoly of sexual predators, that this guy named Trump and Bill Clinton and all their Eichmann types who are in these reports, by the way, that they stop it. And they're saying, well, we have interest. So it's like, yeah, we're living in an explicit demonstration of what they mentioned. But it's interesting, the parallels too, because we're talking about the Vietnam War is about to obviously conclude, and Vietnam is about to unify in 1975. So there is this sense that we're heading in that direction. But by this point in the writing, maybe, and the drafting of it, still the United States is bombing the shit out of Indochina. Hence, they call it a Holocaust, a genocide. So there's also a weird sense of parallel, right? Like, and also it goes back to their analysis in so many ways is correct. But I also do think they were maybe a little bit negligent of the ability of the American empire to be so resurgent, because when you read this text, you get the feeling like we're at this precipice of change and world order. And, and what's funny, back then, there probably were more evidence of that, because at least you had the Soviet Union too. Now it's like maybe it's more and less at the same time, but nonetheless, we're in a similar vein. So again, it also goes back to the irony of the text, which is they really, demand that the reader, I guess they're reading mostly to a leftist audience, because Monthly Review Press, which is a great press, by the way, and they're sort of asking us and demanding that we become material. But I do think also they were, like everyone else in that timeline, were a little bit shooting above, thinking that things would really change all of a sudden. It's just, there's a lot of interesting dichotomies, contradictions in this text I found extremely fascinating and also a little bit depressing, because I was like, little did they know that America is going to come up with neoliberalism. And I would be really interested to know if this is written before the coup in Chile in the same year, 1970, because that, that is what really precipitates this new phase of capital. They were like, well, we're going to try neoliberalism, but we're going to do it first abroad and then take it back, quote unquote, home.
Speaking of what they said that was a little disappointing or depressing, in the essay that you did send, the one written in 2003, where she writes, or they write, this need has become more urgent since 9/11. In the words of activist, organizer, and writer Starhawk, 9/11 threw us as collectively into a deep well of grief. And I was in DC on 9/11. I was teaching high school on 9/11. I was helping kids grapple with what was happening as we were being sent home. And they were even learning as we were being held there for hours that kids that they knew were on the plane that hit the Pentagon allegedly. And so there was all this news and of people that they knew being killed, and there was all this sadness. But I remember vividly two things. One, oddly, and I don't know to what extent this would hold in an actual conflict, but oddly, I was not scared, nervous, worried at all. I was perfectly calm, and I was not experiencing any deep well of grief, even as I learned throughout the day and the weeks more about what allegedly occurred on that day. So I had a very different reaction. And I will I do remember getting a call from the late great Dr. James Turner, who apparently had me on a list of people to be concerned about, because he was calling a few of us apparently to tell, in his word, he said, Jared, I think you should be, after these attacks, judicious, was his word, in what you say publicly in response. Because as I'm sure I was expressing to him privately, my thoughts were anything but grief. So just reading that, I was just, I just, and really what I think I'm saying is that, and I'm going to make this this kind of awkward connection just because I just got this sent to me today and it's already bothering me, and I just feel like bringing it up now, because I'm part of, as I'm continuing to think about these readings and our discussions, I am trying to think, keep in mind our project.
Right.
And I admit at times it's easy to lose sight of that because of all the brilliant histories and fascinating arguments and ideas that are in all of this. But so I keep trying to say, I want to stay focused on, in my own mind at least, how all of this will inform my attempt to contribute to our project here.
Right.
And how I would want it to inform an argument that I, again, in part am seeing trying to make towards my students about how to not engage the prevailing unwisdom about economics and race. So part of what bothers me about little things like that in these essays, these we as Americans experience grief and stuff like that, and or the slights against Pan-Africanism or third worldism. My concern is that part of what I think binds particularly young, uninitiated Black targets of this kind of psychological warfare that the U.S. projects is this idea that we are part of the United States. And one of the reasons why I like this third worldism piece is that it's and this idea that we are colonized by the United States. We are not citizens, we are subjects. And the extent to which we see ourselves and our futures wedded to this current thing called the United States, we limit, if not completely destroy, our radical potential futures. So I want, as much as possible, people to see a hostility in this creation of the United States and we as so-called citizens, or whatever. I always liked how Kwame Ture, when asked, would say, when he was asked, "Are you an American citizen?" he would say, "I carry an American passport." Like I acknowledge I have an American passport that I show people so I can get on planes and go places, but I don't feel like, and I get how the world would say, Jared, come on now, you're an American citizen, you're an American, you have privilege, you have this, that, and the third, especially when you go overseas, at least it used to be, and people would tell you, with that American passport, you have privileges in some cases that even citizens of other countries that you're visiting don't have, which is just a crazy example of the imperialist reach of this country.
Right.
But all that to say, I want there to be some sort of break. Is, look, we are in this struggling, hostile relationship with this society, and it's not going to be solved by routine discussions of economics and business and this, that, and the third, and what we should do. So just quickly, I got this today. Magic Johnson is again speaking at HBCU commencements, and a
Oh.
lot of Magic Johnson's post basketball career,
Mm.
life has been in what I think is a false projection of himself as a businessman when he does really a lower level black version of what Donald Trump has been doing, that is selling
Mm.
his name and likeness to businesses um, for money, and then it's projected as some sort of business acumen. So, for instance, in a couple of weeks, when this really good new documentary that I'm happy to be in about race and football or soccer in this country, it's opening
Oh.
on May 28th at the Harlem Magic Johnson Sony theaters. And people still like to project this is some sort of black ownership or black
Right.
business acumen, and it's not. So when he says during his speech, quote, "The problem we have in our country," again our country, "is we haven't worked together. We need to work together, own businesses together, pull our resources together, and do some great things together." And
Mm.
so just in terms of what we're talking about here, it bothers me because, again, this is Magic Johnson tapping into this mythology that the reason black people aren't doing any better is because we, unlike other groups, he doesn't go on to say it specifically here, but I think unconsciously
Mm.
or it's a
Right.
reach to these more popular existing long running narratives that if we were like the Jews, if we were like the Asians, if we were like the whites, we would be able to be more successful in this country if we worked together and pooled our resources. And to my point that I'm taking forever to make, instead of saying what I wish Grace and James had been more emphatic in saying, that there is no we are not Americans in the way that we is meant as a signifier to carry a claim. We cannot do what others are said to have done and really have not been able to do themselves. And what we need to do is have a better understanding of what our actual relationship is to this country, what its political economy actually is, what our relationship to that economy is, and then
Right.
move forward. So
That's something I wanted to also add, because I'm looking for something to, because I think so. A couple of things. Like, I was a kid when 9/11 happened. I lived in the New Jersey, New York area, so it was definitely grief, but it was also fear. I knew already by then the fear of whatever is happening, but also the fear of what comes next. So that was another thing that was missing from the discourse. She mentioned this, by the way, and she's not. The thing is, she's not nobody who knows that. Like, she obviously knows that. So you can't contain everything in one essay. But I fear was the next feeling that I think a lot of Arab and South Asians were feeling immediately. Every time there's an attack having to do with that kind of spectacle, there's always a moment where a lot of us are just like waiting to find out what the ethnicity of the person is and how we could spin it to being, well, we don't, that's when the we also comes in. But that was how I was feeling at 11 or however old I was. And I was just like, I also knew already that something awful was happening. The other thing I want to add, though, to make a little wrinkle of what you're saying, is Fidel Castro had a speech in, I think, 2003, also directed to the American people. And I teach this speech to my students. And it's a really good speech because the joke is, how Fidel is often yeah how Fidel is often
everybody does a version of that. I hope it's not me. I hope it's not the we who were involved in
right, exactly. That's the only time I was like, oh man. Solidarity, what? It's like,
it's
I
like,
don't know.
it's like they weren't black. Oh, shoo.
You wear a hat. I'm wearing a
Yeah.
hat outside. I was like, all right, well, the funny thing is, like, in the community I grew up in, it's very South Asian, but all of us, Arab and everyone, is just, you could just feel. And again, this is a time when I had already gone through my seasoning of racism through fighting the white ethnics in Queens. There's a lot of Russian Jews and Eastern European Jews who would really have major beef with us. It wasn't just rhetoric. They would, I think, some instances throw bricks or fight us. And some of it was very clearly projection, because none of us were Palestinian, but there was a projection there that I just knew, if you scratch deep enough, that was what they were sort of suggesting. Like, and they were the ones living in the apartment building, so they were upset at us for owning the. It was just very night and day what was happening. Of course, I knew very little about what Palestine was, because I was literally then a child, But also, it's just funny because, like, when I would watch TV back in the day, and I would see guys in Middle East countries, and the typical, like, a camel and a in a seabed of sand, and I'd be like, oh, that's us, look. So there was a weird, like, thing going on in my head. I would identify that, but they also identify. What I'm saying is, I identified that, they identified that, even though none of us were whatever we claimed to be. So I already knew racism is there. So, but by that point, I was in New Brunswick. I was in Central Jersey, and yeah, it was just an interesting time. But Castro's speech, he made a speech talking about grief. He was able to say, well, there's a lot of innocent lives who were lost, but he also pivoted very accurately to saying, this is why you still have to fight the empire. Because at the end of the day, those men who did this horrific thing were part of your intelligence establishment, pretty much, and are part of the project of it. I mean, the only reason why the American state was angry was not because they were killing innocent people. They were angry because they were launching attack against the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and they were angry because they had succeeded. But in the end, when you look at a lot of these sort of previous articles, right? I mean, they were really out in the open about the CIA working with these type of guys for a long time. They were just anti-communist. I mean, there's a guy I keep mentioning. I'm like surrounded by even more stacks of books. But this is Iqbal Ahmad. He's originally Pakistani, but I think he started to work in Colombia. And he wrote this really interesting book called Terrorism, Theirs and Ours. And he even says, he's a political scientist. He even says that at one point, at one point, like, it was very well known in these circles that if you want to get to know the Mujahideen movement against the evil infidels who controlled Afghanistan in the 80s, the Soviets and the communists, Afghan communists, by the way, I know they did some not so great things, but I also want to raise up the fact that a lot of them were women, and a lot of them were going out into the countryside to teach other women to read. And they were having acid thrown at them by men that you're right, that our government supported. So I don't want to lose that line. But there's one interesting thing where he said, he says, oh, here it is. I think he mentions how he wants to get to know who are these people. And they say, I first met Osama bin Laden in 1986. He was recommended to me by an American official who may have been an agent. I was talking to the American and asked him who were the Arabs there that would be very interesting to talk with. By there, I meant in Afghanistan and Pakistan, because by then, Zia al-Haq, who's the general of Pakistan, was an Islamist. The Pakistani constitution was quite secular. All the blasphemy laws, that was done during this era, an era where the Americans turned an eye because this guy was helping us, ship American infiltrators into Afghanistan. And by the way, I know I'm really being annoying here and derailing, but Afghanistan had a female leader, by the way, of its country. But the reason why they erase her is because she was a communist, and she was the leader of the country when Kabul was the last stronghold in the 1990s, and the Mujahideen was about to throw them off. But then he says, the American official told me, you must meet Osama. I went to see Osama. There he was, rich, bringing in recruits from Algeria, from Sudan, from Egypt, just like Sheikh Abdul Rahman, an Egyptian cleric who was among those convicted for the 93 World Trade Center bombing. At that moment, Osama bin Laden was a U.S. ally. He remained an ally. He turned at a particular moment. This is when he goes into the other reasonings because Saudi Arabia had all these Americans. I'm just saying, Castro said it better than this. He did mention grief, which I think is okay enough, but he didn't stop there. He was basically saying, you understand that you're still feeling the chickens coming home to roost because of these people who don't care about you either, and also are misrepresenting, quote unquote, the other side. Because as much as you want to pretend Al-Qaeda this, and also, I know I'm going, but this is just getting, now we're seeing that also in Syria. right? The former he was on a wanted poster for a long time. The ISIS leader himself, busy beheading minorities, talk about minorities, and now all of a sudden, with his still he got in a suit, but his beard's there. He got dressed in a suit, but he was welcomed by Trump. Even Trump joked with him in the White House, "Oh, one of your many wives," and he was like taken aback by that because he was like, "What?" But this is the real scope that need to be there. So I highlighted that same part where you talk about the grief for those reasons you sort of said, and also for the other reasons where like this is not comparable to. Also, this was not a lashing out from grief. It was very personalizing. This was an excuse then by the American military to now say, all right, we were planning to do this maybe 10 years. Let's do it now. So that's the other thing I didn't really like when they mentioned that. It was more like personalizing it and making as if you and I had something to say about what we wanted to do. That's also not happening. Like a lot of Americans supported the invasion of Afghanistan, but over time, I think a lot of Americans again realized, hey, we don't even know where the money's going. And really quickly, that is something that I also really sometimes was surprised by in this essay. But what's interesting in this book, they do mention how Black people in particular, because I guess, James is African American, they do mention, rightfully so, how a lot of Black Americans were becoming part of the military to get a little bit of a social climb, and were, in fact, sort of outstripping their humanity in that same vein, which I liked the critique of. So it's interesting because your point and my point are the same, but the book is just very fascinating because I feel like it was headed that way, but then it somehow always takes another step to kind of, it's almost like with Super Mario, like it just leaps over this thing that I thought it's going to run through. That's where I feel completely confused, because they do mention how Black folks are being recruited into the military and other people by this point, and how they are also obviously part of the killing force, which is true. But then they go in that direction, like you said, like the we. And I'm like, also, yeah, exactly. It's like, who's we? And also, let's be specific. And also, the idea of the citizen itself is so loaded. And I know the timeline we're in now, I wanted to add something else, but I want to let you go into, because I think the ICE thing is also quite interesting. Like with ICE coming out, it's creating an interesting moment to have Americans really begin to think for themselves. Hey, even when I get citizenship, if I have an accent, or if I do everything quote unquote right, it doesn't matter how many years of sweat and blood I put into the tax system. They will find me, say, taking out my trash, another brown guy, by the way, with an accent, maybe like a Chicano accent, and asking you, hey, you have an accent. Those are videos out there in social media where guys like, what do you mean? You have an accent. It's like they just stop talking to each other, but then they just bum rush the guy. So I think that is also a very interesting timeline we're in with ICE. Like it just exposes, hey, your citizenship is very, very superficial, extremely superficial. Sorry about that. I just wanted to.
No, I agree, and don't, and no, I don't have anything to add on this particular point. So if you wanted to keep going on something else, please go ahead.
No, that's like, I just wanted to say, like, there's a funny paradigm of U.S. leftist politics that they're trying to straw through between the old and new left, that I think also is weirdly falls under a little bit of its own burden, because they keep bringing up these two poles of the old left and the new left, and they both get things wrong, right? So we need a new left or something different between the two. But I think actually, ironically, they themselves are kind of sinking a little bit under the weight of what they're trying to do in this one book. Because how can you say third worldist movements are not expansive? Because they keep talking about the human, but I'm like, the third world movement, however flawed, is at least attempting to create something beyond the American, which is quite demonstrably important. But then you double back to saying what we need to think about the American. So that's where it was a little bit confusing, to say the least, sometimes.
Yeah, and maybe that has everything to do with maybe how the book was put together over time with different, um, with writing because if I understand, it was writings comprised over a period of
Yeah,
time, right?
you're right. Yeah, you're right.
And so maybe there's I don't know, a cohesiveness that isn't there. I don't know. But yeah, go ahead. What else did you?
I mean, the Palestinian thing we can get into later because I think that also demonstrates how flimsy citizenship is. I mean, like you talked about having rights as American abroad, and I think I have them too. But let's be honest, if you're a Palestinian American born and bred in New Jersey, because there's been instances of this, and you're caught on the wrong side, like say in West Bank or Gaza, and you're murdered or injured, the government doesn't give two shits about you either. So
Mhm.
that's another interesting
Right, they're not
like
thinking of we
dynamic.
lost an American citizen.
Nope,
Yeah,
they're thinking we lost. Well, nobody.
right.
Just vacuum of nothingness to them. And when I say them, I'm being particular. The U.S. government, state, local, federal, and of course all the different kind of pro-imperialist, U.S. imperialist regime types, coalitional partners, and Zionists, and also sometimes people we have always been opposed to, the inclusionists, who are just obsessed over getting the right type of Palestinian power or having some kind of voice, even if it's so diminished. But that's the other thing about the Palestinian question is so vital. Like, I think if you replace Palestine with Indochina, that's what's happening. I think in so many ways about the
Mm,
critical juncture because they keep mentioning Vietnam and I kept writing Gaza next to it.
mm. Yeah, I don't. That's all well and good. The yeah, I don't. Again, I don't have anything to add to that particular point either. They don't say much about Palestine in this book.
Mm-mm.
They reference they reference Israel's occupation, but they don't really say much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which now that I'm thinking about it is actually maybe interesting. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's not so for instance, is there a history of like I'm sure there is, I just don't know it. Has someone written or who or are you aware of those who have written uh specifically of Marxism in Palestine, for instance?
Yeah. Well, I just want to add, it's interesting also because you note that because the one of the men that they bring up, Amilcar Cabral, he mentions Palestine very explicitly in a lot of his speeches.
Right.
When he talks about this great humanity that needs to be extended, because he speaks that same way. So that's to their credit. They are finding themes that are there. But he
Mm-hmm.
does mention in many of his speeches Palestine explicitly. He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
throw it around. He doesn't just toss it in as like Israeli occupation. He says our brothers and sisters, our comrades in
Right.
South Africa and Palestine. So that's one thing. And he was Marxist Leninist. But no, Ghassan Kanafani, the person we're going to discuss more, he was a Marxist Leninist. And that's why I was
Right.
thinking about the next through line with him, because he is writing a lot through a perspective of the Marxist lens, Marxist Leninist lens, and Palestine for him.
Yeah, I am at least aware of Kanafani, but my point really was in thinking, why wasn't there a chapter on Palestine in this book, for instance?
Right.
And it's
Right.
it does follow sort of the traditional revolutionary talking points about Marx's Leninism in the so-called third world of
Hmm.
uh Russia, China, Vietnam, uh even Guinea-Bissau with
Right.
Cabral is often included in that. So it just was curious. And then the question here, no, they don't talk much about, I don't even remember South Africa being mentioned in
I
this.
don't think so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Um and especially now that I've just finished and have to set up a time to talk about it, the rest of this Winnie Mandela series
Oh, right.
in Africa's and South Africa in Africa's Netflix. um I would like, yeah, I think it's a good question. And just quickly, oddly, the series doesn't address any of this. Even when there's reference to communists or in
Mm.
Contour-Wessie's way, there's no real discussion of Marxist-Leninism and the role it played in South Africa's struggle or in the armed wing and all of that. I would be interested, or I would have been interested, and maybe they've talked about it elsewhere, what the Boggs had to say about all of that. But they do say something on pages 129 and 130 that I definitely wanted to ask you about, because I got my eyebrows raised and I was bothered by what they said, to be honest. And I felt myself falling back into my let's not go too much with the white hagiography.
I know what you're talking
But
about.
Karl Marx, born in 1818, was the first person in history to develop a revolutionary ideology. Really? Really? And then on the next page, as we have seen, the first man to practice and in fact to create the practice of revolutionary politics was Lenin.
Mm-hmm.
Really? So my very first question is, honestly, how in the world could this even be made as a claim? There's no way, there's no way any of us could claim to have read, especially in all of the original languages, everything that people have been writing and saying. We don't know the oral traditions of so-called pre-literate society.
Right.
Like, let's not do too much here. Like, I don't want to sit. I fully believe, just as I joke all the time, that when that my ancestors in Africa were not kings and queens; they were workers, right. And I'm convinced that somewhere in the corner of wherever society they were, my ancestors were talking about, this is some bullshit. Fuck these kings and queens, and we need to redistribute these resources. And they might not have had the language of surplus value and this, that, and the third. But so I'm just saying, like, do we really know what somebody was writing in India in 1,000 years ago? Are we saying that they didn't come up with something? Anyway, I was just
no. We were the same. I did the same thing, because I did it for one fact. I was like, because there were two twin emotions in me. One was like, like, I'm a Marxist-Leninist, but I just say Marx was one of the great thinkers in the modern era under capitalism. You got to be specific a bit. You just like,
that's a good point, right?
Yeah, like modern I even say modern capitalism, or like he was the first. Even other Marxists would say he was a great theorist of capitalism. He was a great theorist of this and revolutionary politics under capitalism, which is how I define it. So I can go against like liberal people of color who are like, he didn't get this right. So that's always my formulation. But also I was just glad to see that they were referencing Lenin again, because again, in the 2003 thing, she doesn't mention any of this. So it's always fascinating to me. But even in this book, it contradicts a little bit of it. Like I said, in China, they described the various rebellions that happened before Marx became who he is, right? So you're talking about the Taiping Revolution, the Boxer Revolution. Obviously, maybe they don't have the same kind of level of zest or quality to them, but they had thinkers, maybe they were semi-literate or literate. But honestly, a lot of our cultures were literate too. That's the thing.
Of course.
Like, Africa and Asia were writing things down.
What I meant, what I should have said is that they didn't have a wealthy sponsor who would allow for them to write and publish and then reproduce the way Marx did. Like, if whoever whose name we don't know in whatever part of the world we can't think of or aren't thinking of in the moment had the equivalent of an Engels to say, no, organize your thinking and put it here, and I will pay for the reproduction of it. And even if I have to hire scribes, I will hire 10,000 scribes, and they will reproduce. So that's all I'm saying. Like, you could praise Marx and Lenin endlessly without saying that they're the first and the only and the this and the that.
Also,
that's all.
With Marx, at least, maybe with Lenin, it was I think Lenin actually had a maybe more difficult attempt, because he was very explicit in some ways throughout his life about what he wanted to do. But with Marx, with our people for a long time, also our stuff was just burned down. So that's the other thing. Like when the French and British came into Egypt, they weren't dumb about Egypt being a civilizational mecca. They were just like, let's burn this shit down. I mean, I think I saw an anniversary came up with the French going into Algeria in the early 1800s. They killed, I think there was a post I saved that I was sending out to friends and stuff about today or yesterday, but I believe it. There were scores of Muslim scholars in Algeria who were beheaded by the French when they first arrived.
Yeah,
so I'm like, so it's like,
so that's
right.
what I'm saying. Yeah, somewhere in 17th century Senegal, somebody had figured this shit out, and then they probably got dragged off and killed. I mean, it's like before they could write it down. Like, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm trying to say. Like, let's.
No, I agree. I think it's funny because they say things like that, and they also say things like Hegel too. They really like, she loves Hegel.
Yeah, she does like Hegel a lot.
Yeah, and it's like, I know. And I have Hegel up here because when I just got into the PhD program, I got a little bit too excited, and I was like, all right, I'm going to read everything. I have not read Hegel, and to be honest with you, I probably will never read Hegel because there's just too many other stuff I need to read. So I'm gonna try.
First of all, it's funny you said that because I had the exact same experience when I was to what when I was a younger man and in grad school. I did the same. I was like, I'm about to read.
Yeah.
If your name is mentioned even in a footnote, I'm getting all your books and I'm gonna read them all. I did. I thought I was gonna be. There was a brief moment. I was like, I'm about to be the shit. I'm about to figure this all out, and I'm gonna solve all the problems. And then I did. I remember picking up Hegel and was like, one, it's over my head, and I haven't been trained in even to. I was like, this may be one of the first times. Him and the other one, Dostoevsky. I remember I tried to read. He was another
the
one.
author.
Yeah, the author.
Yeah, I never read him. I always keep telling people.
I just tried to, and I just remember those are these moments of I haven't been trained in enough European.
Right.
I don't know what the hell is going on. This is way over my head, and then I just turned it into revolutionary arrogance and said, he ain't shit anyway. And Marx said he ain't shit anyway. So if I don't understand him, I don't need to understand him because as Sazi is saying, he's not important. He's not important. But I have to admit, I could admit in my aging self now, I'm calling him unimportant only because Marx said so and because I don't understand what the fuck he was saying.
Well,
and I never really read, so I didn't,
with Dostoevsky, I can't pronounce his name either, which is not fair. But I am not going to read him anymore. There was a time, the last 2 years, I was getting back into fiction more because I also write fiction, and I was like, all right, I'm going to try to go into the greats because Russian novels are pretty dope. Like, they were very dynamic, but I skimmed some of it one time at some bookstore, and I was like, all right, and then I just kept it back. And then I realized he's just an anti-socialist because his story is he got arrested for joining one of the socialist reading groups that were first starting in his time. And as a comrade told me, which was yeah. You look in the mirror every day, like there's a part of you that's like yelling back, "You don't read, beloved," but you're like, "I don't want to read this."
The rest of the sentence is old whack ass Europeans.
You don't need this is gonna piss off. You don't need Hegel right now. Like, let's just be honest. Like, we move past Hegel. We can chill out with Hegel. It's not a bit. I tried. I had the critiques of whatever it's called up there, or metaphysics something. I took political theory in undergrad, and I kid you not, there were days when I was supposed to read Kant, and I had a 4.0 GPA throughout my semester because I loved it. So I'm just telling you, even as a student who really excelled because I sucked in high school, I was like, I would get the book at the last moment and I would read the metaphysics of ethics, and I'd be like thinking like everyone's popping off, and I'd be thinking like, and not just the white kids, other people are like really into it. I'm like thinking like, this guy sounds like an incel. I didn't know the term back then, but I'd be like, well, because he's like inside his home all the time. Like, well, if I lie to you about someone being murdered and I'm murdered, it's like, bro, like what has happened? Like, how many
like go outside and touch grass, bro?
That's truly, it's the only moment where I become the person who critiques me, and I'm just like, you just got to go outside and touch some grass. With Hegel, I got the book. I had the same reaction. I'm going to read this. This seems exciting. Everyone else is mentioning him in my little circle. And then I'm trying, and I'm just like, I made a huge mistake. So I was just like, I closed it, tucked it away. But she loves Hegel. This is enough Hegel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to read Hegel through summaries. You know, like, I'm good with that. Yeah. That's what I'm going to do. So, but again, same thing with Hegel. There is a hagiography that she and her husband do with Hegel that is quite amazing to me because I love them both. I think they're amazing, but sometimes I'm like, Hegel is not, because I think there was a book out that said that Hegel himself was inspired by the Haitian Revolution
Oh,
and was getting a
wow.
lot. Yeah, I don't know what, I think there was a book out. I'm not gonna buy it, but there's a book out there, and I'm like, this is the era of revolutions, right? So it's like, yeah, you have 1848s and you got the 1818 and you got, of course, the culmination 1804. There's no way that Hegel did not know these things. And I think there is a book out there. So again, if you want to know Hegel, know the Haitian Revolution. If you want to know Hegel, know about the Jacobins, even. You know what I'm saying? But even that is funny because they don't mention Haiti because they just jump into Jacobins and they say this is the first time the human. I'm like, you could just toss in Haiti. There was no mention of Haiti. Like you could toss in Haiti between that and how they fed each other intellectually, but there was none of that. I was like, all right, we got it. That's when I said we got to chill out. Like you got to take a breath and be like, oh, you mention, like just mention Haiti. Haiti is the big one in terms of the human, right? Because they weren't just about. I mean, they should have been, but when you had Polish people coming over as mercenaries, they didn't just like slaughter them because they're white or whatever that meant back then. They said,
Mm,
hey, you want to help us? Because we're expanding the human. We're black. We're proud to be black, but we're expanding the human. That is on the next level in terms of when we think about. And I'm not trying to diss on the French, but the French Revolution is good and all. It's better than the American one, but let's talk about that one too. Like you're talking about a group of people who used to have, and trigger alert, used to have their bodies buried under the sand up to their neck as punishment for reading, and then getting ants dropped on them.
yeah,
I think Dessalines survived one of these things because he
yeah.
was so hard, like he just survived it and was like, Toussaint, you're a little too soft on these, white oppressors. And it's like that to me is like you gotta mention it. Like that's the thing. That's my email. Like the 1804 at my email. That's where it comes from. I have a Gmail. So it's like that's the thing to me that was a little bit, and that's the contradiction in this book because they mention also similarly they have some critiques about the Black nationalist movement, which is fair, but to your point they also lump it all together. So I'm like, there's a lot of versions of it that aren't the way they're describing it. And then they
Yeah.
mention the women's movement, and there's a lot of critiques to be had of the women's movement at that time, but it was very bizarre because it was still very like they have these really wonderful critiques about things that I also find frustrating about difference culture. I am like that kind of grumpy old 6-year-old man in a 38-old man body being around these circles. No, because I've had people say to me like, why should we read Lenin, and why should I'm like, what are you talking about? He won. Like just read him or Mao. So there's that part of me, but then there's that part of me like little old Sudip who's like 22 years old reading Fanon and Rutgers libraries like, yo, what the fuck. And then that part of me is like, okay, but I still like the other stuff too. Like we don't have to be like dismissing all of that for something else. Like to me, the Black nationalist movement was an awakening for so many people.
So for me, and let me just make this point in as we move into the second half here. And I'm not rushing us, but I'm there's really only
Yeah.
like for me, what um the 2 points that I would just want to make about this book for our project. One is that the book, I think, is of great value for its discussion of those various revolutions that it does cover.
Yes.
And but I think I do ultimately disagree with their conclusions um, in terms of what do we do with this analysis that they've made of these various revolutions, uh, and how would that be applied to the United States? So I think I just disagree in obviously what we've discussed here, some of the criticism of some of these radical political views of what for me still seems, and I want to ask you about this given the other essay you shared, you know, what they're advocating for still feels too vague for me and unclear in terms of how we would apply it. So when they talk about creating the new structures and new society, in general, I like the idea. I'm just not clear how what they suggest would bring that about. The other point is that the other major point for me is and I'm maybe making the same point in two different ways. but I do appreciate the, yeah, I guess I think I am just making that point in two different ways, that I really do like the, what I'm just calling radical patience, not a liberal patience, but they do seem to talk about a radical patience in terms of what we should expect to see given what work we've put in, even as I still have to disagree in that, even while I appreciate that point that they seem to be making in this book, I still am I think I'm really, and again, I've been dealing with blood in my eye too much this semester maybe, but I'm really where I think George was right. And I think that, I don't know, I'm just going to leave it there. I want to get my wording right. I'm still trying to get my wording right for how to say what I want to say publicly in a YouTube space about what I mean by George is right. And I yeah, let me hold on let me just stop there for a second and let you respond to any of that. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, it's the same. So I wrote a couple of things. Like I love the phrase. I think that should be part of our work too. Like emulate, like, because with Black capitalism and this whole like Magic Johnson and Asian people from the last time we did this, we could just a few days ago. There's a sort of impatience behind it for sure. You get this. Well, there's a return on investment, but it's supposed to be fast still. It's not like a 20-year thing. You're not, but the people who are drawn to these things are quite desperate. So they're not looking for a 20-year investment. I want to get crypto now. I want to get a stake in something now. I want to work in something now. I want to Uber and then own my own Uber and do something now. And then the miracle of speech is that certain people like Earn Your Leisure and other folks on Asian American sites, and a lot of them you've showed in the Instagram clips of like people saying, now I understand the power of my worth, and my parents immigrated here. And there is a sense of impatience, right? There's a sense of like, I want autonomy, I want freedom, I want less stress, I want some sort of independence, right? So I do love that phrasing, because I think that is important for us to lay out in terms of like that part of our, either this article or the next one, where we lay out what's been missed from all these discussions between the Asians and African Americans and Black folks and Asian folks, which is this radical patience that was there, the setting up of real futures that it often goes missing with capitalism. Like, there's obviously a future, but there's always there's a shorter term of it too, because money, money, money. But these, to their credit, they're talking about future for real. They are saying you need to build up institutions, build up infrastructure. They even have really important discussions though that were quite foresight. They had foresight about vision. They mentioned vision. They said what really makes something truly political and ethical is having a vision. I really did love that about them. Like, I just mentioned long-term and short-term view, but vision is correct. They also mentioned about work. I thought that was interesting, because these are very like particular sects or circles I'm in, but there has been in the last few years, at least on Reddit, I believe, discourse around not working, the anti-work movement. I wouldn't call it movement, anti-work discourse. And I think they kind of said correctly, like, well, even in a socialist society, people are going to labor. You need, for things to work, you need people to work, right? So in a weird way, they were actually kind of being a little bit more what's the word? They had vision of that conversation. So there are some levels of their conversation that I think hold true now, right? When I don't want to be the annoying one, but I've said this too. Like, actually, like we talked about in the last live, was that socialism is not about a vow of poverty. Socialism is not a vow of retracting from the public. Socialism is about actual abundance, not this Ezra Klein bullshit, but actual abundance. And that abundance does need efficiency. Capitalism also is inefficient. Capitalism is irrational. Capitalism is barbaric and brutal and cruel and, quite frankly, earth world ending, as we're seeing. So I kind of like how they tackle that in their own way with actual specificity in that degree. But where I also do find it kind of frustrating or maybe a little bit confusing is the other part where you mentioned the lack of specificity in the drawing out of like what is then these institutions should do. Now, I understand a little bit of what they're trying to say, just because, again, the whole Marxist concept, like you don't, it's very difficult to suggest things exactly, but it's weird because they do suggest things anyway. They suggest that America needs to be loved and people need to be, riled up with love. So there is an interesting little let's say friction there. It's almost like tectonic plates kind of splintering finally. And in the 2003 essay, I did say, so with all the values that I find, I do think the last one, in terms of the lack of specificity, is a bit interesting, because I think that's where 2003 lands. Because if there is one part of this book that Grace Lee at least takes into this essay in 2003 from 1974, is this sort of thing about changing the self. Like, they're big on changing the self in this book, but I still think, given the last 4 chapters with China and Vietnam, it's forever connected with changing the self to fight the oppressor, at least because they gave us these examples, right? But with this speech, you don't get that at all. It's very about, like, there's a lot of local, and a lot of growing your garden, a lot about the arts, a lot about, enlightening the soul, which is fine. But now I know it's just a mini speech she gave, but there is nothing. The Cultural Revolution, which she mentions, is no longer connected materially to the other factors they mention in this book about a vanguard and about leadership. And at least if you read the first 4 chapters, like you said, which are excellent, you at least learn, because they're very forward in those chapters, that in the end, when Mao was trying to change the views of the Chinese Communist Party on how to fight, it was about fighting the Japanese. It wasn't just thought for thought's sake. And he wasn't a preacher. Like, sometimes when people say change yourself, you can get that at the mosque, you can get that at the church, you can get that at the Hindu temple. That is not revolutionary thought, to go off on what you're talking about, religion last time, and how it can be quite distracting. You can get that in a lot of religious spaces, which are not radical spaces. And so that's why I find this speech to be quite, like, a little bit religious almost, and a little bit more about the self again, which was a little bit confusing, because you change yourself. Because remember, in the 2003 article, she goes all in on the artist. She talks about the artist being the vanguard, essentially. But in my view, the artist, as you've talked about, as Matume talks about, the artist in a capitalist America is still within a capitalist framework. So there's always a ceiling to it. So at some point, you're going to have to confront that final system. So I was really interested by that dynamic.
That is something I wanted to ask you about specifically in terms of that article. Again, I didn't read it as carefully as I would have liked to, but I did notice, in part because of your highlights and your own notes, that she's making this point about artists as the vanguard, and I always struggle with this because. It's the same reason why I was advocating, and still do, the emancipatory journalism approach, that journalism and media making for me is no different than cultural production. That if it's not decidedly a part of an organized political effort, it's going to be weakened. And the Boggs piece also seems to not account for the fact that not only are these artists part of a capitalist cultural production operation, to the extent that they're not, they have difficulty reaching their own audiences, their own communities. So
that's a good, yeah.
So how can they become the vanguard when you could literally be in the community? You could be living in the community you're trying to reach, and you cannot reach them, especially in the 20 years since that essay was written, where, in 2003, I was handing out emancipatory journalism CDs, mixtapes, where theoretically, at least, I could circumvent the airwaves and even the nascent internet by handing people a CD, by having CDs in physical places where there was still the technology available in houses and cars that they could play them. In 2026, just that option is already gone. That there is no way to mass produce CDs and to have anybody hear them, because nobody has CD players. My students, I don't even think they know what they are. to be perfectly honest. I think I'll poll them next semester. But I feel like I've had some discussions with them, and I don't think any of them have ever held a CD, and
No.
none of them own a CD player.
Right.
So you know, then it becomes, well, then I'll put it on the internet.
Right.
If I want to go to my like if the house, if I open my window right here, if I open my blinds right here, I'll see my neighbor's house.
Right.
They live right there. They're never on my channel. They're never going to see this discussion you and I are having.
Right.
And if I don't go over there and knock on the door and say, yo, turn on my YouTube channel, they're not going to be. Right. So my point is that journalistically, culturally, the ability to produce a vanguard out of that, I think, is impossible. And that's why I keep going back to where I'm at with George Jackson and that. And even what I was writing about with my point about the mixtape was that it was an aggressive interruption to the communicative process in this country. And it's that vibe I'm trying to point to with these references to George was right. That small pockets of disruptive behavior, even in terms of cultural production, would be more likely and more, I think, of powerfully beneficial than this idea that we're going to create and we're going to create a cultural or journalistic or academic vanguard that is going to overcome and overtake the mainstream. That that's the part. It's like, how that's where I got stuck in the quick read of the essay you sent. That's what I wanted to ask you more about.
No, that's the reason why I highlighted it for my students. I mean, I gave them a more blank copy. I forgot that, but that's why I give them this essay, is because both there are things I agree with. Like, again, she still carries forward this really amazing tradition. This is right after the Iraq invasion, when, you know, polling was quite high for mainly whites and other groups who are not black supporting the war. I think Glenn Ford had said it wasn't until Obama's terms that some black polling showed that black Americans were a little bit more leaning on the side of U.S. military just because they saw a black man doing it. I think that was one of Glenn Ford's points of view, but he had said for a long time, even during this era, that wasn't the case. But nonetheless, she was right to argue the U.S. sucks. Like the U.S. empire sucks. It is a black hole of inhumanity. It is. I'm going all in, because right now with Palestine, it's what is it doing? I mean, it's just, again, the Epstein class is just leading a global war, specifically targeting Palestinians, because they are now the vanguard of what could be seen as the real attack on the American empire through ending of Israel. If Israel goes the way of apartheid South Africa and Rhodesia, I think America loses a large chunk of its proxy, of its influence in a major part of the world, right? Saudi Arabia is there, but Israel really does the dirty work of just invading and creating mayhem, right? So they go in that way, which I appreciate. Also, really quickly, so I will respond, but they also weirdly mentioned that we're also we're trying, like they keep saying they're trying to go against the inhumanity of scientific rationalism at the heart of America. And I kept writing irrational. America is not scientific anything. Scientific rationality is not American defined. America is the representative of irrationality and inhumanity by far.
Especially now. Even more so now, yeah.
There's a famous writer they probably knew, George Lukács, who I always keep referencing, Hungarian. And for those who don't know, he wrote the really thick, don't read Hegel. This is actually a bigger book than Hegel, but actually, in my view, way better. I think Gabriel Rockell mentions him, but he is, he wrote this great book called Destruction of Reason. I did not read the entire book, so I'm being very open, but I read large chunks of it. And he talks about the flailing about of some versions of liberalism that ends up in fascist camps. But he was rightfully saying all this type of history, starting from the early 1818s with naturalism and types of it, that was irrational. And I always take that to my thinking about fascism in America. It's irrational. It's not uber rational. We're not in the problem with America's elite is not that they're not in touch with their emotions, is that they are too in touch with their emotions. They're too in touch with their own so-called interests. They again, they see women as sandwiches, like, so they are irrational and barbaric. So that's one thing I wanted to just counter in terms of what they're saying. But the other thing about what you're raising in terms of the cultural production, someone else said this one time where I made a comment about how Antonio Gramsci is perceived. Because Antonio Gramsci is always, I think he's considered to be one of the most quoted and credited Marxist scholars still in a lot of cultural critiques and academic critiques and even poli-sci critiques, but they rarely mention his Marxism. They rarely mention that he, escaped a little bit to Soviet. And one guy said, I really wish I remember who he was, but he was someone commenting on my frustration with that. And he said, yeah, there's a tendency now to turn Gramsci into like a guy who said you can save the world by playing a guitar. And that's what I feel has happened to how we view culture sometimes on the left. Like, we just need the right artist. We need the right vanguard of artists. We need the right movie. But to your point about George Jackson, because I was at this, I did this talk. I think I posted about it, about the history of armed violence in South Asia and armed history. And I'd said, art is important, which is true in what they're saying. Art is very important, but the artists must see themselves as part of the revolutionary army. It cannot be divorced from that. When the artist views themselves, and again, this does not take away from the contradictions of that, because that's how I view myself pretty much. But I still am very like haughty about certain things and individualistic, but I'm at least in that army of revolution, But there is a tendency to view the artist as beyond it, as not being situated in it. That's kind of like difficult to stomach. And to your point, the counterinsurgency methods of Hollywood has also grown quite elaborate. Now we see a version of maybe a version of revolution, which is hard to say, in one battle after another. So they've also grown.
Oh, to me, it's worse. In the online beef I've just been paying some attention to between Boots Riley and some of his fans who are raising criticism of him taking Ellison money for his new film. Oh. And the woman who was the Ellison, I forgot her name, but the Ellison Empire woman who also made Zero Dark 30. So you're talking about Osama bin Laden, the
Catherine Bigelow.
Not Catherine Bigelow, but the funders of that film,
right,
are also funding Boots Riley's new film, and he's aggressively defending himself against his critics on Twitter. And I'll at least say that if he has a point, I'm not seeing it being well made in these Twitter exchanges. It just comes across as defensive. Don't criticize me and my art. And when I thought at least one person in particular was raising just, I thought, sound criticism, like, we especially that you present yourself, and that's, but really my point is that what that beef is demonstrating is what I'm trying to say here, that because Boots is defending himself, saying, who is going to give me $20 million to make this movie if not them? And and what he's saying is, if I want my radical politics to reach a sizable audience, I need to get plugged in. And I'm saying this, and I agree with Mtume and Samantha and others who talk about third cinema. The moment you do that, you've already undermined yourself. So it already weakens. Again, that's my whole point. The only mistake I keep saying Colin Kaepernick ever made in his own struggle was doing that Nike commercial.
Yeah.
Like it's already, like, you can't outdo what that symbolizes to a mass audience. So the question becomes, going back even to this Crushing Wheelchairs film, and what Mtume said some time ago, that it really continues to stick in my head, that audiences, we have to, part of our radical transformation has to include an acceptance of a different form of media, and a recognition of a brilliance and a genius and an enjoyment in a different kind, because it's not going They can't make that look like whatever the latest whatever, no matter how talented they are. They just don't have the resources. They don't have the equipment. They don't have the time. They said last night this film was shot in 3 weekends over a series of months. So it's like one weekend we show up, we shoot as much as we can, we do it again, and then we do it again. And when I look at, the more I watch about how Hollywood films are made, I mean, some of these films, they're taking months and months, and then they go into reshoots and edits, and then again, as I've been pointing out to my students for years, you watch the credits roll at the end of a film, and they're just going for 20-30 minutes of just name after name, all these people that have contributed in some way to this product, and people don't have that. So you have to show up and be able to hear and read and see and whatever our other senses are, media that is not going to look like what we've been raised on, and that in and of itself creates a kind of dissonance among an audience that makes it harder for them to accept brilliance of other forms of art. So that's why I was like, again, when the Boggses are saying artists can be the vanguard, I was like, they're no more likely to be a vanguard than any other sort of political formation would be. And maybe even less likely given.
Yes.
But yeah.
But also it's an interesting, the reason why I share is because it's an interesting contradiction a little bit so the book also says things about labor unions and workers not having to be the center of everything, which is fair, because they are arguing too that labor unions in the American context, when they win higher wages, often it's on the backs of then extraction from somewhere else, which is true. But I think they sometimes misread. I know it sounds because I'm nobody, but the point of the point of working class wasn't so much of a pure ethics as they are very concerned with. It was about leverage. Hence, you leverage the thing you have. Our critique is not so much the labor unions should be just deified, which is not what I think, because what have the labor unions done except for a few in terms of this genocide? I will always bring this up because this is happening. People are being wiped out. Israel is still taking land. So this is the ultimate question, right? This is our front line for everyone. But nonetheless, that is the missing node. But then it was interesting in this essay. So I do think James and Grace would agree on this essay, where they take it a bit further away from workers and they start to say, well, the artist, because they're very involved with the mind, which is fine. But I think this is actually, the book is a demonstration of what we need for most of it, in terms of the leftist discussions we have, which is about education, how that's different from being academic, and intellectualism. And to your point about the petit bourgeois, they're correct to argue that some level of education does need to happen in terms of seeing, because a lot of the heroes are like that. Amilcar Cabral is very educated, very literate. The founders of the Black Panther Party are very educated, literate. So there's truth to that. But this essay then conveys one of those points and takes it a bit too far into a quite individualizing nature of its own. Because again, with artists, what is their leverage? Like I have a poem, I write poems and short stories. I've been published. I have a poem, shout out, at Haymarket Books, called We the Gathered Heat, which is a AAPI poem collection. So I have a poem in there, and it came out like a year and a half ago. It was like a huge thing for me because it's like a collection of poems, but that I'm part of, other people. But I'll be honest, it's a very moving thing to be. And even if I, tap on wood, knock on wood, there's no wood, but whatever. But my partner would hate hearing this. If something were to happen to me, I kind of think that, at least on the intellectual front, I've left behind this poem, because it's one of the few collections of Asian American poetry that's around, which is pretty insulting, but that's true, a collection. But never in my mind did I think that someone would read that poem and think I got it, or think those poems, the better poems that are written there, they would think they got it. You still need the army. You still need the party. You still need something to carry that tradition. And also, every single moment they talk about shows you the ineffectiveness of just leaning on culture, because with the Indochina and Vietnam, there was a lot of people upset, but then it rolled back into disaffection because nothing else happened after that, because everything was repressed, right?
That's how I felt reading in that essay their almost glowing reference back to the Battle of
Seattle.
Seattle in
Yes.
1999,
Mm-hmm.
where, and I've read a lot of people have talked about that as this
Yeah.
moment that they thought was going to do what I don't think it has ever done. Same thing with
Right.
the Occupy Wall Street
Yeah.
stuff, and that's sort of my point with so again, this is why I liked so much of what they did in not in the intro or the outro, but in the intervening chapters of evolution, revolution,
Yeah.
whatever, because there they seem to almost, and I'd have to read it again more carefully to and to flesh this point out, but it almost begins to feel like they're contradicting themselves, and that this essay contradicts
Yeah.
what they were, because what I'm taking from the intervening chapters is capitalism is bad, imperialism is bad, socialism and communism are good.
Yeah.
Armed struggle, if not good, is important and necessary, and or shouldn't at least be discounted. And
Yeah.
at least it's and then that whole point about revolutionary patience, which I think is incredibly important, because
Right.
it then, I think, reduces the likelihood that people will see something like the Battle of Seattle or Occupy Wall Street or the protests after
100%.
George Floyd was killed or Black Lives Matter or whatever, and assume that we're on the precipice of a new world and a new revolution. When I
Right.
think, no, there's too much work that has to be done, and there's too many structures. And I think you raised this earlier, that capitalism has adjusted itself or reformed itself to accommodate. So even just in terms of its deployment of a media environment that I don't think the Boggses could have seen, certainly in 2000, certainly not in 1974, maybe not even in 2003, and certainly that Marx couldn't have, I think, even predicted. And that alone, never mind other forms and technology and military and this, that, and the third, but just the media environment alone seems to do so well in adjusting it. So there's a uprising, people in the streets, cool. We will deploy some nonprofit money and some celebrity messaging, and we'll even put out a few movies and series that appear to be supportive.
The hate you give.
The hate you give. Oh my God, that fucking
my
film.
favorite movie. Because when I watched it, I got angry and I knew instantly so many moments. I worried about you that you would be like really losing it, because there were scenes in that movie where I'm like, oh my God, this is really on the news.
Look, I'll just be real. Old age and medical marijuana is the only thing that kept me from going over the edge on that thing. Just straight up, because that film it's like 90 minutes of gaslighting, triggering bullshit, and
it's horrible.
And there's so many of them, and that's the point. I mean,
Yes.
so even where we were talking about the Southern fried rice or whatever that thing, like,
oh my God, yes,
all of that stuff. All of these things that they all of, and maybe we should even, maybe if certainly if we expand this beyond one article,
right,
and I think we've even talked about this, we should note the sort of podcasting and the films and the TV, almost like when Alfred and Secker do the national security cinema, and they show the thousands of scripts that have been written by former intelligence agency and it's like all of these, including the Catherine Bigelow, all the Zero Dark 30, all of these films are written by and executive produced by and directed by, former military people, CIA people.
Right.
It's all like, and I think we could do it like a version and say, the Donut King itself.
Yes,
the documentary is itself part of this counterinsurgent. We know. Look, we get it. Pockets of people, populations are suffering, and there's Cambodian suffering, and Vietnamese suffering, and Indian suffering, and black suffering, and brown this suffering, that suffering. So here's a film for you,
right?
And now, and that's sort of even my point. Here is someone that, for people like me, who literally have grown up. Well, I guess not literally. I was technically an adult when the coup first dropped, but who's, as a young adult, grow up listening to Boots's music.
Redact
even
your landlord.
You.
Yeah. No, like your songs like Redact or get rid of your landlord.
Kill you.
Yeah.
All of it, all of those songs, like all of that stuff, and My Favorite Mutiny is one of my favorite songs. Where
I used to listen to him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, the coup. Again, talent. In terms of talent, this is not a judgment of that. It's to say that anyway. My point is, you'll even get that. You'll get smatterings of this delivered upon you,
right?
And so and I haven't seen yet. I'm not aware of yet, like the popular Afro Latino film yet, but I'm sure there will be at some point. If enough Afro Latinos make enough noise, there will be a Hollywood film that addresses itself to.
Well, there's Miles Morales. Technically, I mean, those are pretty big.
Oh, the Spider-Man kid. Yeah. Okay, sure, right.
And his
maybe
father's
that's
a cop.
And his uncle.
I'll be honest.
Uncle's the villain.
Yeah. And I watch the films. I like it. That's the point.
Like, he wants a white girl.
Right. Yes. But his father's also, isn't his father's name Jefferson Davis?
Yes.
I don't know what that's about, but that's really on the nose.
They're fucking with us, Sudip.
Yeah,
that's the whole point. They're playing games with us, and then wait, Lin-Manuel directed that? Wait, what did he direct?
No, I think he's just joking, right? Has to be. Yeah. He's not in everything, but he's in everything.
Oh no, they did that. What is it? I watched it. Our family watched it. What is that film he did that does claim that they throw some Afro Latinos in the background of?
But you mean like it's human beings acting in it?
Yeah, it's his movie.
The Heights. Yeah, that was his play, and I think they made a movie of it.
I saw the movie of it. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
I saw the movie.
Cool.
My family, we watched it as a family, and that was.
Watch that.
And I was just hating. I was just like all the way through. I was just like, where are because I'm like, I'm just pointing to my wife and her, like, where are y'all at?
Right.
Like, you speak as much Spanish as they do. I don't see y'all over there. Where everybody's over there looking like me. Like, where?
My partner can't. She says sometimes she just can't watch movies with me because I'm just like, this is wrong. That doesn't make sense. But I gotta be honest. Sometimes that movie, I'm gonna watch it because I forgot about it, just because I think in that film correctly, like the main hero runs the store, or he's does he run it, or does he like?
I think he does run it.
Yeah,
I think he does run it.
There's always that trope. I think we should do that because I'd be fine watching it because like
I'll watch it again.
Yeah, because I think
if we're gonna talk about it, I'll watch it again.
Yeah, because it's like. Because Lin-Manuel to Sounds of Sun Elsewhere point is exactly that result of what we've got. Like these people, like capitalism, as long as it's right, yeah, exactly. Well, he didn't.
Oh, they'll get him right.
Yeah, he also wrote a song. Didn't he write a song for Moana or something? Like he wrote a song.
Probably.
And Terry Gross made a little bit of a joke with him because I was listening to an interview a while ago, and he was like, and he got a lot of awards for it. And then she's like, yeah, because she made a little bit of a dig because you understand the plight of a 15-year-old girl. She made a little bit of a dig, and he's like, haha, I chuckled. But then I thought about it. I was like, wait, you wrote that song? I didn't know he wrote that song, and I was like, that's so weird. Like, so he's the Disney movie magic, right? Like he's the guy they tap because he can do the yo and do that funny voice and be like yo, and he sounds like me when I rap. So every time I hear him, I'm just
wow,
this is crazy. Because I grew up in Queens, but I'm in the suburbs too, so I'm not gonna be out here rapping like exactly. So he's like yo, check it out, 1 2 1 2. It's like, what era are you in? And then he does it in front of the White House. Everyone just clapping because they're like, oh my god, I'm an immigrant, you're an immigrant.
years ago and I'm not going to put them on blast, but I had a friend who said, "Yo, you got to check out this Hamilton shit." They were bigging it up like this is some hip hop.
Yeah.
And I was like, and out the gate, I was like, I don't know who Lin-Manuel dude is. And I said, it's about Alexander Hamilton. So I was already like, I was already hating is my point. And then as soon as I watched it, I was like, this is some corny nonsense. This is absolute anti-historical nonsense that is now being credited as being some hip hop masterpiece. And I was like, this is exactly my problem with the whole hip hop narrative and everything else. It's the same thing with the narrative we have here. It's like
it's offensive too.
This is terrible. I was
It's
like,
offensive.
this is absolutely terrible. Yeah, exactly.
It's offensive.
Exactly.
Like, it's like these are slave owners of Black people. You got some Black folks rapping, which, I mean, they did a good job, but it's like, if you twist that to something else, like say German Jews rapping as former Eichmann or some shit, that'd be crazy. Everyone would rightfully be like, what are you doing? But then
not only were whites, to Chitty Macha's point,
right?
I remember Dick Cheney said he went and enjoyed the shit.
Oh, but it changed his mind, I'm sure.
I'm sure it didn't. And that was exactly my point. If Dick Cheney can go and enjoy this shit, that's all I would ever need to know. I've never seen it. I will not see it. What I did watch and what I should do, I should have done more to support this, to be honest. I'm open for criticism of this because I did watch it and I thought it was great online. Ishmael Reed's response.
Yeah. I was about to mention
Ishmael Reed is brilliant, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him a couple times about other stuff, Muhammad Ali in particular, but I should have done more to help, to whatever extent possible. Yeah, Dick Cheney said he went and saw that shit and loved it, and I said that should be it. Yeah, Ishmael Reed. What's up, Two Black? By the way, Two Black last night, in a kind of funny way, I'll save this for off the air. In a kind of funny way, making fun of me, and where I'm no longer allowed to be. Your book, Laundering Black Rage, was brought up in a very positive way by a comrade who's setting up a book talk apparently for you. So salute. And but Ishmael Reed's play was dope. But that is exactly the point. Ishmael Reed, who should be part of any Black radical artistic vanguard, can barely reach his own community. And even to my own point, like even people, I don't know if he would agree with this, but I bet it's true that even a lot of people that he would want to reach in his own Oakland community aren't familiar with his work because they're far more familiar with whomever else.
And he's been writing for a long. I've read only one of his works, Mumbo Jumbo, I think, and that was a while ago.
Ishmael Reed, not only is he a great writer, he would be on my Mount Rushmore of haters. Like he is.
Yes.
Oh my God, his essays where he talks shit about the producers of the great niggerati is hilarious. Like he is no, I'm not surprised the world don't fuck with him. I'm not surprised because anyway.
No, not to say I never heard of him until I saw him. I think CBS or some major asked him. They actually asked him, I think, to do a mini review because there was like critiques of it. Was like a very after the fact, and it was very minor. But I remember looking it up. I don't know how I came across it. Maybe I was looking for hate on Lin-Manuel, but it was so funny because like there's a scene where the theater is behind it, and he just comes out and he says, "Yeah, I hated it. It was." He just comes out, and then he made that play, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel. It's like, I'm just going to go all in on attacking your darling. And it's right. But to your point too, and to the point of what I love talking about this stuff because I love art. I love culture. I think it's important, but I also get really frustrated when people are desperate for answers. I get that. But then some people who should know better, not Grace Lee or James, they're amazing, but other people, they then prioritize art as the last salvo, as if it's like the last bullet in a chamber, right? Rather than being like, get another weapon or do something else with it, fill it up again. But you shouldn't just think of art as this, because once it's disconnected, it doesn't matter how, like with Boots Riley as the example, like what you're saying, I kind of avoided all that. I've been seeing some of that context. But you know what I would say to Boots Riley, in polite terms, I still think he's a good filmmaker, is just that, okay, 21 million, you need to get to more people. Do you need 21 million? Do you need this right now? Because you already got the other films. You got your show on Amazon once, like the previous one, I think, about the giant. So right now, you don't need that excuse. You can, to Matume's credit, get that audience that you need, maybe on a low, more regional scale, right? That's fine. But the point is, no matter how knee deep in Ellison money you go, no matter how many allegedly billions of people you reach or hundreds of millions you reach, it is nothing that can match the quality and the potentiality of evolution. If you were an artist now working within even a smaller regional framework, getting more people involved, because if you have a party behind you, you know what I mean? Like that is to me where you're going to get actual people involved, because the missing link is the next step. Like there's been so many times where I've been in theaters where I'm like into it. I'm like, this is great. I love this. Like, what's that movie called? Shoot, the Black Messiah thing, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Judas
I mean,
and the Black Messiah.
it was really depressing.
So
I didn't love that, but I was thinking about, and I cried, but there was definitely moments where I was already radical by then, but I'm thinking after the fact, like, but then what happened? Because the movie still leaves you with this sort of, yes, the police are involved, all of that, but it doesn't matter. The police came out and said, yeah, we apologize for murdering this person. But the reason why they flaunt it in our face, because there's no power to do accountability. So that's the missing link that art can never sustain. So art, again, needs to be contracted with an actual movement and politics. And also an actual movement that's not even about movementism. Like there's also this whole Seattle context, like getting people out, doing the thing and doing that. But it's like, okay, but there has to be ipso facto a post after that. I'd be fine with the Seattle thing that happened and Occupy, but now we're in phases where things are getting worse on the Imperial front and the same pattern is happening. So there has to be a real discussion about a national context of party and of course internationalism, which this is where I think Grace Lee and James still shines, regardless of how they think about art. They keep saying the internationalism. They keep saying US empire has to fall for humanity to climb. I actually love that. But the problem is, and they're right. And the problem is the art thing, like you're saying, like now it's worse. It is worse. Even TikTok, because now when I talk to my students,
also an Ellison product now.
Exactly. But there's the affect of independence. There's the affect of small creator, which is the problem, right? Like that's the thing that I worry about, where it's like, okay, you get the impression based on how TikTok is allegedly framed and run that you're getting these independent correctors, whatever, creators. But in the end, it's Ellison, and in the end, they shut off the water when it comes to like Palestinians again, who speak up. So it's like the affect of independence is now misused, or no, used correctly to obscure everything else. The same thing with Ryan Coogler. It's the same thing with same thing with like Crazy Rich Asians. Like I saw the other day, a clip with the wedding that happened. They're like, I missed, like someone was doing an Amazon clip or something, like it was Amazon maybe, or someone who's like, oh, when weddings were like or something bizarre, and it was like was an anniversary of the movie, and people were like, I read the comments. I'm not dissing the people, but it is saying something that in 2003, I think she misunderstood the levels of depravity that the American system would go, including the co-optation of our martyrs, including Fred Hampton, because that movie did not need to be made unless they saw a value in it. And the value of that movie was, you're gonna be killed. You're gonna die. The Black Panther Party died. It ended. So that was the ending goal. It was just a miserable film of like pessimism. So I totally agree. The reason why I give my students this essay is for that conversation, because they love talking about media and education. They always say things like, people need to be educated. And I ask them, who? You can do that, but like, who are you talking about being educated? How will they get educated? Do you really think you're going to go on TikTok all day and then make a following and then you won't be crushed? Like, not to depress them, I don't do that exactly, but these are qualities of the essay that come out.
You know, I was critical of it at a conference last year or 2 years ago at this point, maybe, when the presenter was talking about podcasting our way to freedom. And
Oh, wow.
and you know, yeah, it's just yeah. So
Oh.
the I lost my thought. Anyway, I know we got to wrap up here, but I, you know, for today, but I want to dang, what was I going to say? Anyway, one other good thing that I really like about the book, at least, is in addition to what we've already said, is I did want to throw up one more shout out to their insistence on moving past a variety of mythologies, including the God one, and I do appreciate that. Even you know, so damn, it'll come back. I don't know what I had something I wanted to say, but you and I will be regathering again in a couple of days before I think you're going to take a little bit of a break to do your actual work. And we're going to, so on the 18th, in 6 days from now, you and I will return for our discussion of Ghassan Kanafani and what I've at least tentatively titled Zionist and Donut Mythologies.
Yes.
So
it's
so folks, please do come back for that. Sudip's work is linked in the show description to his Substack, so please check that. Please do all the things to support the platform. There will be, we could always come back and do a part 3
definitely.
And there will be extensions of these discussions as we go forward. And if you are in the DC area tonight, please come see Crushing Wheelchairs. And if you're not, please at least check the QR code and get more information about where the film can be seen. It's incredible, very powerful. Baltimore had, loved it last night. The East Coast has been loving it, and DC closes the run tonight. So please come out if you can. And the book, again, some of you are asking, is Grace Lee and James Boggs, Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century. That's what we've been discussing. That's what we've been discussing these last 2 episodes of our Donut King project series. So anything else you want to say before we get out of here? Anything I forgot or you want to mention? Or
no, I think that's it. I do encourage, like you said, for people to read the book, because there's a lot of really good things in there. And frankly, it's one of the better books in terms of like summarizing a lot of the key points of these major revolutions, which is like a huge task. And it's a very interesting blend of history, theory, and philosophy. So even though we have critiques of it, it's a classic book for a reason. So, and I also, again, appreciate the space, and I really appreciate the commenters, because everyone's like, saying some of the same things and also asking really great questions and stuff. So I always appreciate the space. So I really, really am grateful.
No, thank you, and likewise, this has been great. And this is the book we'll be talking about, the Kanafani book on Zionist literature. And if you're interested, please check my previous interviews, at least one about Kanafani on the channel, Kanafani on the channel. So maybe you can even check that out as a precursor if you're not familiar. Feel free to check the book. And before I go, will I have any South Africa scholars on to talk about the Winnie series? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Just quickly, I to be perfectly honest, have been pursuing. I've been less aggressive in pursuing interviews, and more interested in engaging people's work. But that said, if folks know someone or want to introduce me to someone or suggest someone, I'm happy to do it. But the chase producing part of the job is of less interest to me, I have to admit, over time. So largely a one person operation here. So we do the best we can. But I'm open to it. and as I'll talk about on Thursday when I wrap up the series on Winnie, there's at least one scholar in that series that I wouldn't mind reading her work. She seems to have an appropriate pro Winnie position, but because I admit the people that he talked to in the series, I don't know their work, so I don't. And there's a couple I'm very suspicious of. I'm like, why do you keep coming back to this person? Because all they want to say is, we can't keep putting up on a pedestal, and Winnie needs to be held accountable too. And I'm like, oh my god. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. This false equivalence of. Like they really did. It's like Winnie Mandela versus the state of South Africa, and it's like the apartheid regime, hundreds of years of apartheid regime versus Winnie. And I will bring this up.
Right.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, they mentioned this in the series, spent 3 days covering all of the media, police, and military atrocities of apartheid, and spent 9 days on Winnie. That's all that's to me, that's all you need to know about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, although there's a lot more to it. But that to me was a hell of a, oh my God. I was like 3 days versus 9 focused on Winnie.
I have a family member who originally was like saying, oh, Winnie Mandela, she did this and this and that. And then they read more. And it was like between 2 weeks. I think I was reading something and they said, oh, never mind. I get it. Like, I get it. She's like really great.
Hey, and I'm with her. I'm just bottom line with her. Like I don't apologize. I don't regret. And she, as she said, I am the product of my people and my enemies. And I love that line.
Wow.
I love that line. I want to put that on my tombstone. If I was going to be buried, it would be on my, I was like, that's it. I'm a product of my people and my enemies, you motherfuckers. Don't you dare criticize me without holding up what my enemies did to me first. Don't you, she even says that, how dare these people have something to say about me?
Wow.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm definitely Team Winnie all day, every day. All day, every day. So, and yes, where people could be held up for criticism in a people's court, in a people's, tribunal, if necessary, in a don't you dare drag out no Afrikaner and have me sitting there talking about I'm sorry and I should be held accountable. Get the out! Oh my God! Oh my God! You talk about me losing it. I was like, I was losing it in that. I was like, yeah, but 3 days versus 9. I said that was the headline for me. That
reconciliation, whatever that was, it was just a way to make sure that most Black people would be fine with most white people not really losing a lot of their wealth or power or status.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. And if that was what they said. If you come out here and say what you did, you don't have to give up any land, you don't have to give up any money, you don't have to lose your job, you don't have to, you're definitely not going to go to jail. But yeah, 3 days on all of the apartheid regime and 9 fucking days putting Winnie up there and all the people that accused her of this, that, and the third, and this and the third, and all of this. And I was just like, anyway, but we'll get into that.
Well, yeah, I love that. That's really interesting. I mean, it makes me angry. So I've been seeing some of it. It's the same reaction to me because the Afrikaner situation is still the same. Like they just they have golf courts, going across land, bemoaning at CBS, like, I'm under attack. It's like, bro, like, you're fine, man. You're fine. Like nothing, like things needed to change even more. So it's like, whatever.
Done and none, you're not being an annoyance. But so you're saying, please Google the text Gorillas and Combatant, Mothers by Dr. Sipokazi Magala. Thank you for the suggestion. I don't, so yeah. All right, everybody. Sudip, thank you very much again. Please, everyone, check his Substack linked in the show description if you're not already signed up. A lot of great work there. And at some point we should come back and talk about some of the stuff that you write there.
I love that.
And if there's ever a hook to the Donut King project, we can do that. If not, we can just do a separate discussion. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, everybody, please do all the things to support the platform. Like, share, subscribe, all of that. And as is always the case, peace only if you're willing to fight for it. As Fred Hampton used to say, see you downtown Silver Spring, just outside DC tonight for Crushing Wheelchairs, and catch you next time with more.
And what did you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, have set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy and defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.